Hold everything. Before you toss that handful of dirty, dark pocket change onto the counter or drop it into a vending machine, you need to stop and look closely at what you are actually holding. Every single day, thousands of ordinary people unknowingly throw away pieces of American history simply because a coin looks old, worn out, or covered in dark spots. They see a dirty piece of copper and assume it is nothing more than a piece of trash worth exactly 1 cent. But experienced collectors know something that the average person completely misses. They know that a heavily circulated texture, complete with dark patina, worn edges, and natural aging, is often the exact proof needed to identify a genuinely historical artifact. When a coin looks like a real, deeply old survivor of the decades, it carries a story that a shiny, newly minted coin simply cannot match. Today, we are looking at three specific Lincoln wheat pennies that most people would ignore without a second thought. These are the coins that hide in forgotten coffee cans, inherited cigar boxes, and the bottom of your pockets. We are going to examine the tiny, almost invisible details that separate a common piece of pocket change from a highly sought-after numismatic treasure. I need you to promise me one thing before we go any further. If you find one of these coins, do not clean it, do not spend it, and do not let it out of your sight until you have examined every single detail I am about to share with you. One microscopic letter, one specific wear pattern, or one unusual characteristic could dramatically change everything you thought you knew about the pennies sitting in your home right now. The third coin we will discuss today is especially deceptive, so stay with me until the very end, because missing that single detail could mean walking away from a remarkable discovery. 1940, D. Lincoln Wheated Penny. Our journey into the hidden wealth of pocket change begins in the year 1940. To truly understand the significance of this coin, you have to transport yourself back to a world that was standing on the absolute edge of massive historical change. The United States was finally shaking off the heavy, suffocating shadows of the Great Depression. Factories were roaring back to life, industries were expanding, and the economy was demanding an unprecedented amount of circulating coinage to keep up with the daily transactions of the American people. Across the Atlantic, World War II was intensifying, casting a lonely, uncertain shadow over the globe. But on American soil, people were buying newspapers, paying for bus fares, and purchasing groceries using the very coins we are talking about today. During this incredibly tense and dynamic period, the Denver Mint was tasked with striking millions of Lincoln wheat pennies to fuel the growing economic engine of the Western United States. When you hold a 1940 Denver minted wheat penny in your hand today, you are not just holding a piece of copper, you are holding a physical witness to a defining moment in global history. Take a very close look at the front of the coin, the side collectors call the obverse. Right away, you are greeted by the iconic, stoic profile of President Abraham Lincoln, facing to the right. This masterpiece of engraving was created by the legendary sculptor Victor David Brenner, and it first debuted decades earlier in 1909. Even if the coin is heavily worn, you can usually still trace the strong outline of Lincoln's face. Arching gracefully across the top edge is the national motto, "In God We Trust," a phrase that has provided comfort and identity to generations of Americans. Over to Lincoln's left, the word liberty stands as a bold declaration. To his right, you will see the year 1940. Now drop your eyes just a fraction of an inch below that date. There, resting quietly in the negative space, is a tiny, distinct letter D. That single letter is the mint mark, and it is the absolute first detail every serious collector looks for. It signifies that this specific piece of copper was born in the intense heat and massive presses of the Denver Mint in Colorado. That tiny D completely changes the historical context of the coin, separating it from the millions produced in Philadelphia or San Francisco. Turn the coin over and run your eyes across the reverse. This is the design that made the series famous around the world and earned it the beloved nickname of the wheat penny. Two perfectly balanced, curved stalks of wheat frame the left and right edges, symbolizing the vast agricultural strength and deep-rooted prosperity of the American heartland. Across the top rim, you will find the traditional Latin phrase e pluribus unum, meaning out of many, one. Dominating the center of the coin are the words 1 cent, and just beneath them, the proud declaration of the United States of America. It is a simple, elegant design, but the way it wears down over the decades is what truly fascinates numismatists. This coin was engineered with a very specific traditional composition. It was struck from an alloy consisting of 95% copper mixed with a 5% blend of tin and zinc. This creates the classic bronze appearance that we all associate with older pennies. When it was freshly struck, it weighed exactly 3.11 grams, measured a precise 19.05 millimeters in diameter, and had a thickness of 1.52 millimeters with a completely smooth plain edge. But here is the secret that most beginners fail to grasp. The overwhelming majority of these coins did not sit safely in bank vaults. They went straight into the pockets of factory workers, soldiers, store clerks, and everyday citizens. They were dropped, scraped, passed back and forth, and exposed to the elements for over 80 years. Because of this, the 1940 D penny you find today will likely possess a deeply dark, heavily circulated texture. It will look like a genuinely old, heavily used real coin. To the untrained eye, this deep brown or nearly black surface looks like damage or dirt. People see it and immediately assume the coin has lost its value. They think that because it does not shine like a mirror, it belongs in the trash. This is the most critical mistake you can make. Experienced collectors actively seek out this heavy, natural wear because it is the undeniable fingerprint of authentic history. A coin with an honest, heavily circulated texture proves that it is a real survivor. The natural oxidation, the softening of Lincoln's cheekbone, the gradual wearing down of the fine lines in the wheat stalks. These are all badges of honor. When an expert places this coin under a bright halogen lamp and looks through a magnifying loupe, they are not looking for perfection. They are looking for originality. They want to see the organic, untouched surface that can only be created by 8 decades of exposure to the world. If you take a polishing cloth, a chemical dip, or even a simple abrasive pad to this coin, you will destroy that history in a matter of seconds. You might make the copper temporarily shiny, but you will strip away the microscopic flow lines and the original patina, instantly reducing its collector appeal to almost nothing. Never, ever clean your old wheat pennies. While millions of 1940 D pennies were minted, the sheer passage of time has brutally thinned the population of coins that remain highly attractive. When collectors evaluate this coin, they are searching for a balance between that authentic, old coin texture and the sharpness of the original strike. Even on a circulated example, if the D-mint mark is bold, if the date is crisp, and if the overall eye appeal suggests an untouched, original life, the coin elevates itself above the ordinary. Serious numismatists also scan the surfaces for any signs of repunched mint marks, subtle die cracks, or minor striking errors that occurred when the heavy Denver presses were pushed to their limits. Finding an error on an authentic, well-circulated 1940 D penny adds an entirely new layer of rarity to a coin that already feels like a tangible piece of the past. So the next time you see a dark, worn 1940 penny with a small D under the date, respect the journey it has been on. It is not just a penny, it is a survivor of the pre-war era. But do not look away now because the next coin in our countdown takes us into an entirely different era, carrying a mint mark that completely changes the rules of the game. 1946, S. Lincoln Wheat Penny. Our investigation now moves forward to the year 1946, a time of massive emotional and economic transition for the entire world. The devastating global conflict of World War II had finally come to an end. Millions of American soldiers were returning home across the oceans, stepping off transport ships, and stepping back into civilian life. The country was experiencing a profound sigh of relief, followed instantly by an explosive economic boom. Factories that had spent years producing tanks, aircraft, and ammunition were rapidly retooling to produce cars, refrigerators, and consumer goods. America was rebuilding, expanding, and spending. To facilitate this massive surge in daily commerce, the United States Mint had to pump vast quantities of circulating coinage into the economy. Over on the West Coast, the San Francisco Mint was operating at full capacity, churning out millions of coins to support the booming Western states. This is the birthplace of the 1946 S. Lincoln Wheat Penny, a coin that physically embodies the optimism, and the sheer momentum of post-war America. When you pick up a 1946 wheat penny, the very first thing you must do is look directly below the date of 1946 on the obverse. There you will find a distinct, elegantly curved letter S. In the world of coin collecting, the S mint mark carries a very special mystique. The San Francisco Mint has always been associated with unique production runs, proof coins, and a slightly different striking character compared to Philadelphia and Denver. Finding that little S instantly makes the coin more interesting to examine. Above that mint mark, Abraham Lincoln's portrait continues to hold its dignified pose, surrounded by the words "Liberty" and the motto "In God We Trust." On the reverse, the familiar twin stalks of wheat encircle the denomination in the name of the country. Just like the 1940 issue, this coin was struck from the traditional 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc alloy, weighing 3.111 grams. The mint had returned to this classic bronze formula after the emergency steel pennies of 1943 and the shell casing copper pennies of 1944 and 1905. The 1946 S represents a return to normalcy, a return to the true classic American penny. However, do not let the idea of normalcy fool you. Because the American economy was moving at blinding speed, these coins changed hands constantly. They were used to buy the first post-war sodas, to pay for tickets at the cinema, and to purchase fuel for the massive steel automobiles of the late 1940s. Because of this relentless circulation, finding a 1946 S with a heavily circulated texture is practically guaranteed if you are pulling it from old pocket change or a forgotten glass jar. This heavyware is exactly what gives the coin its soul. When you hold it, it feels like a real historical object. It does not look like a modern, sterile piece of metal stamped out by a computer. It looks gritty, aged, and deeply real. The copper will have transformed from a bright, flashy red into a rich, deep chocolate brown, sometimes bordering on charcoal black. You might see tiny nicks on Lincoln's jawline, or notice that the highest ridges of the wheat stalks on the reverse have been smoothed down by thousands of thumbs and index fingers over the decades. To the absolute beginner, this heavy circulation looks like a reason to throw the coin away. But to the seasoned numismatist, this old, authentic texture is a canvas of history. It proves that the coin lived the exact life it was minted for. There is an undeniable psychological draw to a coin that looks genuinely old and heavily used. It connects the modern collector directly to the post-war generation. This is why you must never attempt to scrub, dip, or chemically alter a 1946 S penny. If you try to remove that dark chocolate patina to make the coin shiny again, you will leave behind microscopic scratches that ruin the coin's surface tension and permanently destroy its numismatic integrity. A heavily circulated, deeply original 1946 S is always preferred over an artificially brightened, chemically stripped coin that has lost its historical dignity. When collectors place the 1946 S under magnification, they are looking for specific San Francisco characteristics. The S mint mark itself is heavily scrutinized. During this era, mint marks were still punched into the working dies by hand using a mallet and a metal punch. Because of this manual process, the exact position, angle, and strength of the S can vary from coin to coin. Specialists look for repunched mint marks where the worker struck the die more than once, leaving a ghosted or doubled impression of the S beneath the date. They also look for die cracks or subtle doubling in the lettering. Even on a coin with a heavily circulated texture, a clear, bold, repunched mint mark can dramatically elevate its desirability. Furthermore, the San Francisco Mint occasionally struggled with die wear during massive production runs, meaning some coins were struck weakly, while others received a sharp, commanding impression. Finding a 1946 S that somehow survived decades of heavy use while still retaining a sharp, well-defined mint mark and clear lettering is a thrilling moment for a collector. It is the thrill of finding a survivor that refused to be worn completely smooth. As you hold that dark, worn 1946 S in the palm of your hand, you have to respect the fact that it is a direct physical link to the moment America stepped into the modern age. It is a tiny, copper time machine. But as fascinating as the post-war era is, The timeline of the wheat penny was slowly moving toward its conclusion. The next coin in our deep dive brings us into a new decade with a coin that is notoriously difficult to find in pristine condition and carries a story that makes collectors stop and stare every single time they pull one from a roll. 1952 S. Lincoln Wheat Penny. We have now arrived at the year 1952, a completely different chapter in the American story. The country had firmly established itself in the atomic age. The Korean War was dominating the headlines. Rock and roll was beginning to stir in the underground, and the television set was rapidly becoming the center of the American living room. The 1950s are often remembered as a golden era of American prosperity, and the pocket change of the time flowed effortlessly through diners, drive-in movies, and booming retail stores. But in the world of numismatics, 1952 was a very specific, challenging year, particularly for the San Francisco Mint. While the Philadelphia and Denver mints were producing Lincoln pennies by the hundreds of millions, the San Francisco Mint struck a significantly smaller number of pennies in 1952. This lower mintage immediately places the 1952 S. Lincoln Wheat Penny onto the radar of every serious collector attempting to build a complete date and mint mark set of the series. When you examine a 1952 S. Wheat Penny, your eyes should automatically drop below the 1952 date on the obverse to find that crucial S mint mark. Just like the 1946 issue, the presence of the San Francisco mint mark completely alters the identity of the coin. The obverse features the same enduring portrait of Abraham Lincoln, and the reverse displays the classic wheat stalks that would only remain in production for a few more years before being replaced by the Lincoln Memorial design in 1959. The 1952 S was struck using the standard 95% copper alloy, weighing the precise 3.11 grams that define the series. But what makes the 1952 S so compelling today is not just how it was made, but how it aged, and how difficult it is to find one that truly stands out. Because San Francisco produced fewer of these coins compared to the other mints, finding any 1952 S in your pocket change is becoming an increasingly rare event. But when you do find one, it will almost certainly bear the heavy scars of a long, active life. It will possess that highly desirable, heavily circulated texture that screams authenticity. By the time this coin reached the modern era, it had spent over 70 years bouncing around the American economy. You will likely see deep, dark oxidation, perhaps scattered black carbon spots, or even tiny flecks of green verdigris where the copper has naturally reacted with the environment. The rim might have tiny dings, and the fine parallel lines within the wheat stalks on the reverse will likely have merged into smooth, flat surfaces. To a person who does not understand coins, a heavily worn dark 1952 S looks like a piece of junk. They see the dark patina and assume the coin is ruined. But to the expert eye, this is the exact appearance of a real historical coin. There is a massive demand in the collecting community for coins that look exactly like what they are, antique pieces of circulating history. That heavily circulated texture provides a tactile, visual proof of the coin's journey. It feels old. It looks old. It is the definition of a real coin. When collectors evaluate a 1952 S, they do not punish the coin for being dark or worn. They evaluate how gracefully it is aged. They want to see honest wear that has not been manipulated by human interference. This brings us to the ultimate warning that applies to the 1952 S more than almost any other coin. Because this date and mint mark combination has a slightly lower mintage, people who find them in the wild often panic. They see a dirty 1952 S, realize it might be a better date, and immediately try to clean it to make it look brand new so they can sell it. This is a catastrophic error. The moment a harsh chemical or an abrasive cloth touches the surface of that coin, its value and its historical integrity plummet. The collector market does not want a 1952 S that has been stripped of its natural history. They want the dark, moody, heavily circulated look that proves the coin is an original survivor. A graded, authenticated 1952 S with original surfaces, even in a lower circulated grade, will always be treated with far more respect than a coin that has been artificially shined. When professionals place the 1952 ECS under magnification, They are closely studying the strike quality. The San Francisco Mint during the early 1950s was known for having inconsistent quality control. Some 1952 S pennies were struck with fresh, sharp dies, resulting in beautiful, crisp details even after years of wear. Others were struck with old, exhausted dies, meaning the coin looked mushy and poorly defined the exact second it left the mint. Collectors hunt desperately for those rare examples that feature a strong, bold strike, a clear S mint mark, and an untouched, naturally aged surface. They search for subtle die varieties, checking the positioning of the S, looking for any trace of repunching, and examining the lettering for the faint shadows of doubling. Every tiny millimeter of the coin is scrutinized because in a year with lower mintage, any unique characteristic makes the coin exponentially more fascinating. The story of these three coins, the 1940D, the 1946S, and the 1952S, proves that the most valuable details in life are often the ones we completely ignore. Millions of people walk around every day carrying actual, physical history in their pockets, and they trade it away for a cup of coffee without ever looking at the dates, the mint marks, or the beautiful, heavily circulated textures that tell the story of the American century. The next time you find an old, dark, dirty wheat penny, do not throw it in a jar. Hold it up to the light, check beneath the date, study the wear, and respect the journey it has taken. The treasure is already in your hands if you just know exactly how to look at it.